in studio. Always better radio when we have some great guests. And today is another one of the Meet the Candidate segments for the 5th Congressional District. And I think I saw Max at a forum about the economy, you reminded me, not that long ago. BSU's Mike Hicks was doing that presentation. Introduce yourself to our listeners, please, Max.
Absolutely. So thanks for having me on, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm running in the 5th Congressional District. I'm a Christian, a husband, a father, and a conservative, and we are ready to get to work on behalf of the 5th District.
All right. Max Engling is the name, and we want to talk about yourself to begin with. Aside from your personal stuff you just dropped with us, tell us a little bit more about yourself, and maybe how about a more specific question? What are the maybe 2 or 3 things that you think sets you apart from the other many candidates that are seeking the Republican nod for the 5th District for the great state of Indiana?
Absolutely. Well, I would say first off, I've never served in public office before. I've not been elected, not a career politician. However, I do have 14 years of public service, both here in Indiana and out in Washington, D.C. And when I look out at what's happening right now, we have so many huge crises that we're facing. We have to drive down the cost of living. We have a massive debt crisis where we're going to cross soon $1 trillion of money just spent on interest that we could be spending elsewhere. We've got a crisis at the southern border that I've seen firsthand. And so to me, it's about how do we solve these problems? How do we get to work on them right away? And not just talk about them. So I'm tired of, especially on the Republican side, talking and losing on these issues. So for me, it's about process. I think we need to send somebody to Washington that understands how to build the coalitions here, that understands how to put together working groups to solve these problems instead of just talking about them. And, when I spent time in Washington, a lot of my role there was training members of Congress, including almost all of our Indiana delegation. So I have a really strong background on how do you do this job well, so I can hit the ground running as soon as we get to Washington.
You referenced that twice now, the work you did when you were in D.C. training Congress. What kind of work was that all about? I'm intrigued.
Absolutely. So it's a couple of things. The first role that I had was much more of a blocking and tackling. So it's how do you talk to your constituents, communicate well, listen to your district? How do you set up your budget and hire staff? And just do the blocking and tackling well. And then the second part of my role, and that was on the House side of Congress, and then the second part of my role was much more of the strategic and political, and how do you get legislation across the floor? How do you build those working groups to say, we're going to solve this? And that was with Speaker McCarthy in his office.
So it sounds like you were more of a teacher than a doer, but now you want to flip the script and be a doer instead of a teacher. Am I hearing you somewhat correctly?
That's part of it. Well, the institution should be member-driven. It shouldn't be run by staff. It should be run by the folks that are elected and sent there. And so my job was to say, how do those people do that well? And it's built a foundation to say, how do I do it well if I'm given that privilege?
Max Engling is our guest. He is one of the candidates for the Republican U.S. 5th District. I ask everybody that runs for anything, whether it's local or on a national scale, why? Why do you want to do this? And what I mean by that is there's so much drama in the world. There's so much stone throwing and or lots of other bad things that happen with respect to people that are willing to have public service and serve in these roles. Why do you want to open yourself up to that?
I appreciate that. So I am, one, I want to do it as a public service. And the second, and maybe even just tied with that, is I have 4 kids that I mentioned. I'm a father. And when I look at both now and into the future, it's how do you make things better for them and for other Hoosier families and children? And so this is the way that, this is the best thing that I can do using the experience that I have to make sure that we're representing the district well and really leaning into how do we make the future better, especially like I mentioned, we have so many huge crises. And one of the strategic advantages that I have in this is we're not surprised at what Washington is like. We've seen the good, we've seen the bad. We know what's coming. And that helps us to hit the ground right away, even when, like you mentioned, a lot of times it can get ugly. We've seen it. We're ready to rock.
This is Max Engling, candidate for the 5th District congressional seat in the great state of Indiana. May 7th is the primary. When you started your campaign, as was the case with all the other 25 candidates, I'm exaggerating, for the Republican side, she was not running. Victoria Spartz changed her mind. She's back in. What I would ask you, as I've asked other candidates for this same seat, If the incumbent had announced at first as being in the race, would you have decided then to enter the race at all?
So I would not have primaried her. Sitting member of Congress, if she said that she was going to continue running, I would not have primaried her. However, now that she's back in, it does clarify a lot of what I'm talking about, and I'll explain that. So,
okay, please.
When you have somebody, if you send out a true freshman to Washington who is just getting their feet under them, it takes about 3 years to figure out what you're doing, 2.5, 3 years. And I know that because my responsibility was to catch incoming members and train them on how to do it. And then if you send somebody back out who, and while I have appreciated the current Congresswoman, I've worked with her, I know her, we're friends, I also have seen maybe an unwillingness to build the coalitions, to build the working groups necessary to bring a lot of what we're talking about across the finish line. And so whether you're looking at sending out a brand new member or someone who's maybe not shown that desire or willingness to get it accomplished, I think you need somebody who both has experience but also has a willingness to say, hey, I'm a conservative guy. Let's go get these conservative wins and let's start getting them now because our window to accomplish it is short.
Live radio show March the 6th at 8:38 in the morning Eastern time as we are sitting here right now, Max. The national reporting is that on the presidential side of our world is that Nikki Haley will indeed announce sometime later today that she's dropping out of the race. That official announcement, again, live radio, things change, things ebb, things flow. Do you, closer to home, based on what we know is the case for the 5th District of Indiana, intend to stay in the race now that the incumbent is back in?
Absolutely. So we're in it for, the next generation. We're in it for how do we be successful for the 5th District now? And the current Congresswoman getting back in doesn't change that dynamic. To me, we are pressing just as hard, maybe even harder now to say, let's represent this district well.
All right, very good. Anything we haven't touched on last moment that you can get out there to what you hope would be your constituents, assuming this goes the way you want it to go?
Absolutely. So I would say one, especially when you look at the border, I've been down 2 times and I've been to Texas and Arizona and seen it firsthand, the crisis that's happening down there. We need a Congress and a White House that are ready to get to work after this election so that we can solve some of these massive problems that are out there. And I'm ready to do that. And I would say if you go to maxforindiana.com, I'll show a plug to go check it out is that we have a time-lapse video of the largest campaign sign in Indiana that you should go check out at maxforindiana.com. It's the size of 18 football fields. I'm not going to spoil what it is, but you should go take a look at it.
All right. Very good. Nice to meet you or see you again. We met at a previous event, running into each other. Look forward to hearing you continue through the campaign season here. Best of luck to you.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it, and I would ask for everyone's vote.
All right, Max Engling doing what he's supposed to do as the campaign continues to go forward, and so does the show. This is Delaware County Today on WMUN.